Hello, it's Lord Slar here, and today we are discussing, or rather ranting, about the Series 8 finale, Death in Heaven. A lot of New Who finales have come in for a lot of criticism. Think of The Wedding River Song, Hellbent, and The Timeless Children. While I believe all three are rightly lambasted by some fans, one that often goes under the radar for scrutiny is Death in Heaven. I'm guilty of this too, and I really haven't paid the episode too much thought at all. But one viewer of my channel said how much they hated it a while back, and that inspired me to take a deeper dive into this episode. Let's just say I wasn't keen on what I found. First of all, we'll start off with the handling of the Doctor. I do actually like Capaldi's Doctor in Series 8. He had a refreshing, no-nonsense attitude, and I loved watching him brilliantly discuss the wonders of the universe sardonically. Much better than the Matt Smith-like character he would become. However, there are definitely some issues here, and these pertain to the Am I a Good Man theme. The first issue is, why does he hate soldiers so much? I know Tennant had a weird thing about guns, and I didn't really like that either, but since when did the Doctor have such a negative knee-jerk reaction to any soldier? Did the writers forget how many close friends and companions were soldiers, either during or before their time together? Think of Ben Jackson, the Brigadier, and even characters like Ian and Stephen if you're into the expanded universe. I get that the Time War did change the Doctor somewhat, but wasn't the whole point of the RTD era the Doctor getting over his Time War trauma? Wasn't that why Matt Smith was back on board with the grand adventures around the universe? The Doctor may have become quite an extremist when it came to the use of weapons, but his instant disgust towards people like Danny Pink felt completely unjustified and out of character. This makes Capaldi's Doctor's attitudes towards soldiers feel really out of the blue for the character and quite obnoxious. The other problem I have with this arc is how it's weirdly hypocritical. The point of it is to demonstrate that we shouldn't really see the Doctor in any kind of absolute moral terms, as a good or a bad man, and that really he's just a traveller. Now I completely agree with this message, and it would have been a great way to reset some of the ridiculous Space Jesus hero worship that had happened around the Doctor's character throughout New Who. The problem is that this message is entirely surface level. In this very story we see some over-the-top heroic imagery when the Doctor skydives from a crashing plane to reach the TARDIS to go down and save Clara from the Cybermen. Obviously that could just be dismissed as one overzealous flourish to an episode, and not a contradiction of what this particular theme establishes, but it goes completely out of the window later on in the Capaldi era. By the Doctor Falls, we're supposed to be marvelling at what a great heroic man the Doctor is for sacrificing himself for people he barely knows, a far cry from the man who is just a traveller. So which is it, Moffat? Is the Doctor just a traveller, or a selfless hero? Make your mind up. That's the big issue I have with the resolution of this theme. It's done purely for optics, it has no lasting impact, and it feels as if the character learns nothing from what they were supposed to have gone through in this series. It is simply style over substance. The next issue I have is Clara. Now I have issues with her as a companion in general, but I definitely feel that she is worse than usual in Death in Heaven. One of the big problems I and many other critics of Clara have is that because of Moffat's weird obsession with her, she is made out to be the most clever and wonderful person ever, who is so important without ever actually having earned any of those things in the writing. For example, in this episode at the beginning, she pretends to be the Doctor to delay the Cybermen from killing her. They even put a face in the title sequence out of Capaldi's, for fuck's sake. She acts with so much confidence and bravado in front of the Cybermen, in a way that I've rarely ever seen even the Doctor manage. So where did she develop this from? Bear in mind, she was just a regular person from Earth. Sure, the experiences of travelling with the Doctor change a person, but the way Clara acts just feels so unearned. She's just special because the writer insists she's special, which breaks a cardinal rule of writing. Show, don't tell. Another example of this, which is perhaps even worse, is the fact that Missy states that she is the reason the Doctor and Clara travel together, as she connected them. Now wait a minute, that's now two reasons why the Doctor and Clara have ended up together, the first one being the Impossible Girl arc from Series 7. Is this not getting a little contrived? Secondly, why does Missy want the Doctor and Clara together? She basically says they're perfect for each other without ever explaining why she wanted them together. It's yet another throwaway line to add surface level importance to Clara being the companion without having any actual character development to earn such a thing. This episode basically relies on the viewer being invested in her and Danny's relationship for its drama, but neither have been particularly likeable characters. Danny in particular doesn't really have any character to speak of to begin with. Their relationship has zero on-screen chemistry, and the way Clara puts him in awkwardly nasty situations throughout the series and jokes about him murdering people comes off as very mean-spirited, meaning the audience is hardly going to be invested with the two being together. Furthermore, Clara's obnoxiously and artificially inflated sense of importance as a character makes the more human drama she goes through with Danny come off as jarring. This demonstrates the issue with a character having an unearned importance, as it makes their character unrelatable on a human level, making the character drama uninteresting, which results in a good chunk of this episode being redundant. Missy is the next issue I have with the story. To be fair, Michelle Gomez is great, and Missy's character in this story is a million times better than she is later in the Capaldi era. However, I do have a couple of fairly major complaints about her. Firstly, is the way her character is written. She's exactly the same as so many of Moffat's female villains. In fact, when I first watched Series 8, I was genuinely confused after Time Heist, as I thought Missy and the villain in that episode were the same character for a while. The elephant in the room here, however, is Missy's grand plan of creating a giant Cyberman army, only to gift it to the Doctor purely for the purposes of showing how meaningless his principles are, as he won't use it to save other people. Missy's reason for wanting this? To get her friend back. I do not buy this at all. Yes, the Doctor and the Master were friends, but that's something that has clearly long since passed. Even when they were the last of their species with John Sim as the Master, he still hated the Doctor. Just saying that out of the blue, Missy wants to be friends with the Doctor again is poor writing, and another case of telling and not showing. To make a character change their mind on something so radically, there needs to be some kind of experience or development that motivates them to this change, otherwise it's just a contrived imposition by the writer. And why has Moffat contrived this motivation? Purely to shoehorn in a situation where the Doctor is offered an army, so a conclusion can be brought to the good man theme he was working on. With a whole series worth of build-up to what Missy was planning, this contrived plan, which doesn't really make any sense, is a complete anti-climax and just makes the audience feel as if their time has been wasted. As a result, Moffat sacrifices scenarios actually making sense just so he can explore certain themes in a very surface-level way. By far the worst sin this story commits, however, is the use of the Cybermen. It doesn't need to be a Cybermen story. It's as simple as that. At the end of the day, their purpose in the plot is merely to be a big army for the Doctor to be offered control of, which could have been any number of Doctor Who villains, or even a new one. This serves to really cheapen the Cybermen. Bear in mind, the original function was to serve as a chilling warning against the desire of humans to extend their lifespan by any means necessary to the point where they lost their humanity. None of that thinking is here at all. They're just a generic robot army who fly around like fucking Iron Man. Now I know a lot of stories that I consider to be quite good don't really explore this aspect of the Cybermen at all, such as The Invasion or Earthshock, and to an extent they do cheapen the Cybermen somewhat, but they are at least a force in their own right, rather than just being a generic robot army. That's the big problem for the Cybermen here. They are just Missy's bitch. They have no autonomy of their own. Missy, for some reason which is never explained, just happens to be controlling them. This has been really damaging for the Cybermen, as ever since in New Who, they have just been the Master's useless lackeys, no longer the force they used to be. Even though World Enough and Time got the Cybermen right perfectly, the Doctor Falls just turned them into generic robot army explosion fodder again. It's so sad to see how such a brilliant and thoughtful idea like the Cybermen being used and abused in this way just to provide spectacle for the exploration of the themes Moffat wants to do this week. Another thing I don't like is how high-tech the Cybermen have become. We already have the idea of them constantly upgrading in Nightmare and Silver, and now they're so advanced they can send down Cybermen suits in rain particles and use the dead, despite the fact that a dead person's cells are dead, meaning they're not really compatible with a Cybermen suit to begin with. I feel the Cybermen being so advanced misses the entire point of what makes them scary. The original Cybermen were fairly low-tech, having to lug around giant boilers on their chests just to stay alive, with a face so horrifying it has to be covered up with a surgical cloth, that many alterations have been made to it. It looks like a fucking horrifying existence, and hence it makes sense why they would want to remove their emotions, because that pain does look unbearable. That's why they're so scary. When you have Cybermen this advanced with such polished looking suits, well, it looks like luxury space age Cybermen. With that level of technology, I'm sure they could overcome the issues of pain, hence they wouldn't even need to get rid of their emotions. This shows how the scary human element of the Cybermen has been abandoned in favour of them just being a generic robot army, which distances them so far from the interesting idea that made them so fascinating to begin with they have become outright boring to watch. To conclude, Death in Heaven is a terrible episode that doesn't get the level of scorn it deserves, thanks to the huge shadow cast by stories such as Hell Bent. The plot is a mere contrivance so that the theme Moffat has toyed with throughout the series can have a conclusion. This would be bad enough if it wasn't for the fact that the conclusion he comes to has no lasting impact, which just makes some of this series, and especially the finale, feel like a gigantic waste of time. The human drama in this episode is meant to come from Clara and Danny, but considering Danny's lack of character, their lack of chemistry, and Clara's lack of being like a fucking human, means that it falls flat too. With all that gone, what's left? Mere spectacle, and a couple of good performances here and there. It typifies Moffat's style over substance mentality, which he had during some of the series he presided over. This episode is really vapid and uninteresting if you switch on your brain for a mere minute, despite its own pretensions to being a very thoughtful episode. There's not even any so bad it's good appeal given how dour the tone of the episode is. Overall, Death in Heaven can get in the fucking sea. Not being as bad as Hell Bent is not a free pass.